We will begin with one of the reports in our researcher, Dr. Jason Greenberg Motamedi, who will present the work, and then we will have our practitioner, Florida Suniga Gray, who will reflect on the work. Dr. Jason Greenberg Motamedi is a senior researcher at Education Northwest, supporting schools and districts in educating English learners and increasing parent involvement of English language learners. He led the REL Northwest Roadmap project, which generated the report he will present. That report is the English learner student characteristics and time to reclassification. As I mentioned, he will be followed by Floridalia Suniga Gray, who serves as a dual language specialist at Hutto Independent School Districts in Texas. She has 26 years of teaching and administration experience in K-12 education, served as a classroom teacher in a variety of bilingual ESL settings, and has extensive experience with English learners and economically disadvantaged students. Flori will serve as our practitioner reflecting on Dr. Motamedi's report today. So Dr. Motamedi, if you want to get started with your presentation, thank you.
Absolutely, thank you so much. So this project is one of several that we conducted, that we at REL Northwest conducted looking at English language learners, ELLs, in Washington as part of a research alliance funded through the Regional Education Lab, the REL. So our partnership asked us to examine time to reclassification, that is, how long does it take ELLs to gain English proficiency and reclassify as former ELLs, and also how does that vary by student characteristics such as gender, home language, and initial English proficiency. So what's reclassification? Simply stated, it's the point at which an ELL is deemed by the state and school to be proficient in English. Specifically, it's the point at which an ELL meets the requirements of reclassification. Now, these requirements differ from state to state, often between districts, and sometimes even within districts from school to school. In Washington, reclassification is fairly simple. It happens when ELLs reach a grade-specific score on a statewide English proficiency assessment. The ones we'll be talking about are the Washington English Language Proficiency Test, but currently they're using the ALPA 21. So other states add other criteria. These often include content area assessments, so the students have to pass their grades English language arts or math assessment. Sometimes they which could be grades or a portfolio, and sometimes even parent approval. I know you're all from different states, so your reclassification criteria are all likely different. But I point out that for the first time, most, but not all, states in the U.S. are using one of two different English language proficiency tests, either the WIDA or the ALPA 21. So why does reclassification matter? Why would we look at it? Well, there's any number of reasons, but one of them is that ELLs are much more likely to drop out and much less likely to graduate than their peers. So a nationwide study found that 25% of students who were ever ELLs dropped out of school, compared to 15% for the never ELL. But it really matters when they reclassify. So ELLs who reclassify in later grades had higher dropout rates. So a sixth of the ELLs who were reclassified by grade 2 dropped out of school, which is about the same as the never ELL population. About a fifth of the ELLs who were reclassified by grade 5 dropped out of school. And finally, of the ELLs who were still classified in high school, a third of them dropped out. So it really matters when they're reclassified. So studying reclassification is indeed very important. So let me take a moment and talk about Washington that we did the study in. So this is south of and including Seattle. And take a moment to talk about our partnership with the Roadmap Project. So the Roadmap Project is a collective impact initiative aimed at dramatic student improvement and achievement in South King County, Washington. Members include the 7 school districts that you can see here, community-based organizations, higher education, and a number of different research associations such as ourselves. There are 125,000 students in the Roadmap region, so they comprise about 12% of Washington State's public school students and about a quarter, 24%, of Washington's ELLs. This is an incredibly diverse area. So, as I mentioned, there are roughly 20,000 ELLs who speak 167 different languages. By way of comparison, there were, at least at last count, 176 languages spoken by students in New York City, which is a much larger area. Of these students, of these English learners, about 46% are Spanish speakers. So one of the biggest problems in calculating a typical time to reclassification is that at no point in the study have all the ELLs in the sample reclassified. Inevitably, we have incomplete data. So in this study, we had about 17,000 students who started between 2005 and 2011. The last year of data we had was 2013. So this means that by the end of the study, 84% of the sample had reclassified. So we have partial data for that 16% who didn't when they started, but not when they stopped. So to get by this problem, to resolve this problem, we used a statistical method to predict when students would reclassify. This is a form of regression that was actually done with the odd name survival analysis to create predictions of time to reclassification that could be seen as typical for the entire population. It also allows us to isolate the relationships of one student character to another. So what did we find? Overall, we found that in this population, ELLs reclassified in about 3.8 years. So we found that 3.8 years, we found that 50% of ELLs were expected to reclassify in 3.8 years, so sometime by the end of 3rd grade. And that 84% of the students were predicted to reclassify by the end of grade 7. We also found that the median time to reclassification varied by English proficiency, entry to kindergarten, gender, home language, and I'll go over each one of these individually. So, not surprisingly, we found that the more English ELLs knew on entry to kindergarten, the faster they were classified. So, students who came in with advanced English proficiency, we classified about 1.5 years faster than those who came in with basic or intermediate English proficiency. You can see on the figure that by grade 3, 50% of ELLs with advanced English proficiency are reclassified, compared to 34%, about a third of ELLs with basic or intermediate proficiency. By grade 7, the difference was slightly smaller, with 89% of ELLs coming in with advanced English proficiency reclassified, compared to 83% of those coming in with basic or intermediate proficiency. So we found that overall, ELLs coming in with advanced English proficiency were almost 3 times more likely to be reclassified each year than students entering with either basic or intermediate English proficiency. We didn't find a significant difference between those coming in with basic or intermediate proficiency. We also found, again, because we've seen it in the literature, that girls reclassify slightly faster than boys. Overall, it was about a half year faster on average. You can see that girls reclassified in about 3.6 years, and on average, boys in about 4.1 years. So the difference was that female English learner students were reclassified, were almost 1.5 times more likely to be reclassified than boys. Finally, we looked at home language. So holding gender and English proficiency constant, we found that there were differences in home languages. Somali and Spanish speakers took the longest to reclassify, while Chinese and Vietnamese speakers took the shortest. So what I'd like to point out here is that these differences in home language in many ways point to the limitations of this study. So one of the limitations is we had no student level measure of poverty. We know from other studies that poverty has a relation to student learning outcomes, and that students from different home languages are likely to be differentially affected by poverty. Also, we didn't have a parent education level. So we know, for instance, that many of the Spanish speakers in our community were from rural Mexico and may not have had much formal education. Finally, we had no measure of family experience. So Somalis in this community had actually grown up in refugee camps in Kenya. Consequently, that must have an impact which we can't measure or isolate. What did we learn? We learned a number of things, and we suggested that, one, provide support for all English learners, regardless of their proficiency. All ELLs need ongoing direct support to really succeed in school. Second, that we worked with the districts eventually to start designing and delivering interventions for students who take longer. Finally, we talked about differentiating not only by proficiency level, but also by home language. One of the ways that we looked in doing this is by dual language support. So I encourage you all to take a look at the full report. It's got much more detail and nuance than I did in my quick summary, and the appendices also have much more info on the methods. So I'm going to pass it over to Flory and hear about reclassification from a practitioner's perspective. Thank you very much.
Hello, and this is Flory Zuniga-Gray, and I am at REL Elementary with Hutto ISD in Texas, as you heard. And my role is as dual language specialist and instructional coach is quite varied, and is also due to the large increase in English learners that our district has had in the last 10 years, which is over 300%. So our dual, basically I manage the dual language program on our campus and the Gomez and Gomez dual language structure that we use and other initiatives. So basically I just work with the teachers and making sure that district initiatives and supports for students are taken into account. I help teachers with instructional planning, and then I also support our response to intervention by being part of the team and being able to just speak to the different issues that students have. And I also provide testing for students in their language and content area sometimes. And I do work with the rest of our campus leadership team and with the district curriculum and instruction team that is made up of content area specialists and our bilingual ESL specialist. And of course the teachers and the parents. Okay, and so in my reflection, I noted some similarities between our district and the study findings. And because of the district increase, I also wanted to share our program and the way that it has been restructured to serve our English language learners, and some ways that this study can help us serve our English learners better. Under similarities, we too see a correlation between the initial proficiency at kindergarten and the student's short-term and long-term successes. And student performance also varies by their language other than English. And because our populations of other languages are not very substantial, it's really hard to tell with this particular population. But as far as our Spanish speakers, it really is, we see a lot of similarities and a lot of those variances. And also students who have reached advanced or advanced high on the Texas English Language Proficiency Assessment System. I forgot about this. By third grade, have also shown a marked advantage to those who do not reach that level by third grade. And at that point is when we also provide not only but also the content area assessment or state test that they can utilize to pass, to be able to be considered for exiting the program. Okay. All right, and so basically on the the required criteria, like I said, it's the state test, and at third grade the criteria is the TELPAS, which is the language assessment, and the reading test or the STAR test. And so therefore it's just one test plus, of course, teacher recommendation. Okay, and our program, as I mentioned, we have a dual language enrichment program. And again, this stemmed from the fact that we have a large increase in our English learners, plus we had noticed that we needed to look at a program that was going to provide the biggest gains for our students, and of course research-based. And so we went with the two-way dual language. The one-way dual language is what we had been running before in the inception of the bilingual program in Hutto. And 3 years ago, we went ahead and started implementing the two-way dual language, which at that point we have our English learners working together with Spanish learners. And so basically the goal of our program is to produce biliterate and bicultural students. And maybe we're not as interested in exiting students, but yet we definitely want them to be as proficient as possible. And of course, when they've reached those the standards for exiting, they're given the option to opt into the program, just as the Spanish learners are given the option to opt into the dual language program. Okay, and right here, I went ahead and put up a graph that shows our implementation schedule. So as you can tell, we are, this campus in particular is in third grade. This is our first year with third grade, so therefore this is our first year to have state testing with students that have been in the program. Now, our LPAC committee will make a determination as to what language our students will be taking their STAR test. Now, students, of course, have to, in order for it to count toward exit criteria, they would be taking the test in English without a dictionary, without extra time, and without other accommodations like oral or online testing. And that would meet the content area testing for them. And so basically it'll be a while before we can fully assess how our program is going, and then we're hoping to go ahead and move it into, in some form, into the middle school so that students continue to develop their language. Okay, and some ways that the study findings can inform our current work with our English learners. It's very important, and it's come up a lot where we have students that become long-term ELLs because at 3rd grade they were not able to exit, and then when you get to 4th grade, they not only have to meet standard in reading, they also have to meet standard in our 4th grade writing test, which exists at 4th grade and at 7th grade. So as we all know, writing is one of the last things for students to become literate in, and so therefore it's very hard for them to exit after that point if they're not overall doing well academically and language-wise. Now, we use different measures as far as what would the time for students to test in English, and we test their reading ability. One of the things that we look at is their DRA levels, which is the reading assessment that we use. And so if they're on level in English and Spanish, that's a very good indicator that they would be able to demonstrate competency on the state test, and therefore we would go ahead and use that. But being able to see this study and the ways that that students react at certain years, and knowing that we do have those long, it's very important that we provide the interventions that they need, if that's what they need, or provide the language supports, because like just recently we came across a student who is in 5th grade, and yet nobody has, it's always been, oh, it's a language issue. And after going through the response to intervention process, it was determined that learning disability. So I really believe that these type of studies, in particular this one, can really help us look at what's really the issue with students. Is it a language issue, or do we need to move past that and look at the overall student achievement? Thank you.